Hello and welcome to this tactical analysis of the Villarreal versus Bayern Munich UEFA Champions League quarterfinal first leg tactical analysis. This game was bonkers. It's insane, just really ludicrous. It finished 1-0 to Villarreal. Before we jump into the video, if you enjoy the content, please give it a like, consider sharing it on social media, maybe subscribing. With that, let's start off focusing on Villarreal's tactics. Starting with Villarreal's deep build-up, Rui would often look for those long balls into the centre forwards. Danjuma looking really to try and make runs in behind off long balls into Moreno. This was against a 2-4-2-2. This had the wide midfielders going to press both the fullbacks and then the centre backs as the ball was played. If it was played shortly, they would try and come across and try and narrow the pitch towards the touchline. Bayern Munich eventually fell into a more typical 4-2-3-1 pressing shape, and then would just have the far-sided wide midfielder come across and narrow the pitch if the ball was played short. Bayern didn't persist with that 2-4-2-2 because of just how much space it ended up leaving for Villarreal to be able to exploit. We're thinking of this space behind Pavard on the right hand side, as well as also behind Davies on the left hand side. I'd say with the substitutions, not too much changed in their press. As I mentioned, they did move to that 4-2-3-1, but instead of having Müller as that CAM, you instead had Musiala in there, and he would try and help press towards whichever touchline, and you'd have Goretzka as the other CDM with Kimmich. Okay, so I also wanted to focus on set pieces for Villarreal, specifically throw-ins from the right-hand side. You'd have, Foyth, the right back, taking a throw-in. Lo Celso would provide short, as well as also Moreno. Moreno's the actual target typically, with him looking to try and maybe get a flick in for Danjuma, or hold it up with a late run from Capuy, looking to try and get beyond the centre forwards and into this space on the right-hand side. Other than just Capuy, Coquelin was also involved in this as well. So sometimes he would come relatively narrow and he would try and run into the space created by the fact that Danjuma's running from the left-hand side in between these centre-backs and potentially pulling a centre-back with him, in this case at Meccano, and that would create a bit more space for Coquelin. But also sometimes Coquelin decided to stay relatively wide, looking to try and see if they could stretch the Bayern Munich back line and just create a little bit more space centrally for the likes of Capuy or maybe Moreno, etc., to be able to try and exploit. Lastly, I want to just focus on Bayern Munich's build-up play. We've got here the 3-1-6 setup or 3-1-4-2 setup. Pavard, the right back, later in the game, that would be Sula, played as this right-sided centre-back with Upamecano and Hernandez as the other centre-backs, and Kimmich screening ahead of them. From any of these back four, they were really happy to make these really long diagonals, these switches of play, to try and exploit the width that Davies and Coman were providing. Musiala, Müller and Gnabry, and then later once Gnabry goes off and you have Sané, were playing as like the number 8. Initially Musiala was coming from his centre midfield position, moving into this kind of number 8 position, but then later in the game, as Müller was subbed off, and even slightly before that as well, he actually started to play almost as more of a centre forward, looking to try and occupy this right hand side half space a lot more, and also provide runs into the box to compete in the air for crosses. When Bayern Munich were playing the ball on this left hand side with Davies, they were looking for combinations between himself. Obviously he's lightning quick, so he'll always threaten to go in behind, but with Lo Celso being as diligent as he was and often dropping almost to become a right wing back, it did kind of clog up this space, obviously helped out by the fact that the other centre midfielders are coming across too. But Lo Celso being really diligent in dropping into this right wing back position and tracking Davies, as well as also sometimes dropping or staying narrow, to prevent easy passes into Gnabry and help congest the centre of the park, gave Villarreal a lot of solidity in this central space. So yeah, as Davies progresses on this left hand side, Gnabry will try and combine with him, as well as also Musiala or potentially Müller, but typically more Musiala. As Bayern Munich's opportunities on this right hand side are reduced by Villarreal coming across and having such narrow spaces between their back four and midfield, as well as also one of Danjuma or Moreno dropping to become a CAM, and just allow the likes of Capuy and Parejo to be able to come across and still have solidity by the fact that one of Moreno and Danjuma has dropped. Bayern Munich will be forced back, and then they could do that switch that we mentioned, and now you've got Coman who will have a lot more space. So Estepinian or Foyth would look to try and close the space so that whoever the wide player was for Bayern Munich who was free didn't have the ability to be able to just run down the wing and be able to whip in across. So when the ball was played on towards the right hand side, Bayern Munich would look to try and have Müller or maybe even Musiala making those runs in behind between the centre-back and full-back for Villarreal, looking to try and keep the full-back as tight or as narrow as possible to give Coman more space. On occasion, Pavard would also try and make a run around or underlap his wide midfielder. The same with Süle as well, although when Süle had come on later in the game, Süle did station a little bit higher regardless, so he was a lot less of a centre-back and more of like a more aggressively positioned full-back. Again, this aggressive position later in the game, as well as also the aggressive position of Hernandez and Kimmich and Upamecano later in the game especially, but throughout quite a lot of the game, allowed Bayern Munich to be able to press. If the play broke down, they could press really high and, you know, force a turnover as quickly as possible. This counter-pressing position, whilst obviously beneficial for Bayern Munich, did also create a lot of spaces for the likes of Danjuma and Moreno, supported by Capoue and Lo Celso, to break at pace and with a lot of potential for Villarreal to be able to score. Going back to Coman having the ball on this right-hand side, he was often looking to drive down this side, and with the movement of the fullback or these number 8s as well, it forced Villarreal to be quite deep, and then obviously they were trying to stay relatively narrow too. So that meant, because it was so flat here, it created space at the top of the box for Kimmich to be able to, or even Müller, to be able to just hang back a little, as like maybe Coquelin or on the left-hand side, Lo Celso dropped into that wing-back position. It meant that there was a channel for the likes of Müller, Kimmich to be able to receive the ball on the edge of the box and then maybe whipping across, or maybe play a smart little through ball in. It was really nice. With that, we've covered the key tactics, and I'd like to show a few scenarios. Okay, so the first thing we're going to have a look at is Villarreal defending. They're here in their back 4-4-2, so we've got our back line and then we've got our forward midfield and then our 2 centre forwards. On this occasion, we've got Lo Celso staying narrow, but as I mentioned, sometimes he'll be out here wide, looking to try and nullify the width that Davies is providing. Instead, he's here looking to try and keep things tight between himself and Capoue and nullify the threat of Gnabry. This is against the 2-1 or 3-1 for Bayern Munich. So at the moment, your 2 centre-back for Bayern Munich are actually higher than the defensive midfielder, and your right centre-back / right back is here in this kind of like midfield position, but typically they would be in more centre-back positions here, Upamecano and Hernandez. But this, I think, is a really good example of how aggressively positioned they could be, again, towards the whole counter-pressing idea. You've got your width as well on the right-hand side with Coman, and just note how narrow Gnabry is, and the fact that he's able to float both towards the left hand side and then also towards that right hand side. And here we have one of the switches that I mentioned, with Kimmich being the orchestrator here, looking to try and exploit the fact that Coman is holding width on the right. With Coman in position on that right hand side, you've got both Musiala and Pavard looking to try and exploit that space between the centre back and full back for Villarreal. This goes back to what I mentioned about Villarreal being kind of compressed, as Capoue and Parejo both look to try and help out with those runs, and then that will allow Müller to be able to pick up a spot on the edge of the box. And also, as mentioned, one of the 2 centre forwards, Danjuma or Moreno, dropped to try and help out here as well. On this occasion, Bayern Munich's cut back here was intercepted, but Bayern Munich, Müller's the one in close proximity, so immediately counter press, get the ball back, get it back out wide into Coman. And then given this 3-1 midfield and the fact that Davies is really high up, playing as practically a left winger on that left hand side, he can join the attack as a potential for a cross comes in from the right hand side. Okay, and with Kimmich's cross being collected by Rui is then able to, allow Villarreal to set up again, and they have this 2-4-2-2 shape. So the 2 wide midfielders tuck inside, so that being Lo Celso and Coquelin, they come inside. We see here with Coquelin more narrow, and then on the right hand side we can see that with Lo Celso too. And then you've got your centre backs and your 4 here in midfield with your centre midfielders and full backs. This is against what initially was, I believe, a 2-4-2-2 press by Bayern Munich. So you'd have Müller and Lewandowski, so Müller here and Lewandowski, looking to try and congest this centre of the park, just make it difficult to be able to pass into it. It was Capoue or Parejo. And then as the ball is played out wide, they're going to look to try and support their wide midfielders in pressing towards that side. But as we can see here with Rui's long ball, that meant that there was a lot of space in behind the fullbacks for Bayern Munich, who were pushing higher, almost into like midfield positions with Musiala and Kimmich. So you can see here what I meant there by the space in behind the fullbacks. Here, Pavard is having to track back from a higher position to try and defend this space. And then similarly here on this left-hand side, look at all the space that Moreno would potentially have if the ball was played towards his side instead. That was what the change to a 4-2-3-1 rather than 2-4-2-2 pressing shape was to try and defend against for Bayern Munich. And then just again note the two wide midfielders for Villarreal that I mentioned who tucked inside. Okay, just quickly running through one of Villarreal's throw-in setups. So here on the right hand side with Foyth, and then you've got Capuy, who can provide a run from deep, looking to try and run between the centre-back and full-back for Bayern Munich. Got Moreno, who's typically the target man for these kind of throw-ins, and then Danjuma's looking to try and exploit any space that he, being Moreno, creates by dropping off the line. So whether that's here between the left-back and left centre-back for Bayern Munich, or even potentially between the two centre-backs themselves. And then just note the positioning of Coquelin as well, because he varied his position. Here, he's more narrow, he's close to the play, he can potentially make a run inside. But on other occasions as well, he was happy to stay out wide too. Okay, so in this scenario, I wanted to demonstrate Villarreal's counter-attacking ability and the players that they would try and commit to those counters. Initially showing here the 4-4-2 shape that Villareal are using against this deep build-up by Bayern Munich, although on occasion they did move to like a 3-4-3 or a 4-1-3-2. When Bayern Munich were built up for a little while and Villarreal already had numbers committed higher up the pitch, they would look to try and box Bayern Munich in as much as possible, and that could be one of the reasons why they would move to a 3-4-3 with Pau Torres, the left centre-back, pushing into a centre midfield position and allowing Parejo or Capuy to be able to commit higher up the pitch. Anyway, this play progresses. You have Gnabry making a run more central. Please have a look in the tactical summary notes below. You've got Gnabry here making a run straight through the middle whilst Musiala is dropping. But Bayern Munich were happy to try and hit runners like this early. So whether it was Gnabry, maybe Coman, or even Lewandowski. On this occasion, they're looking to hit Davies out wide on the left. Unfortunately for Bayern, Davies kind of fumbles his touch on this left-hand side. Foyth and Lo Celso are able to get across and win the ball back, and then Villarreal look to try and counter-attack. Eventually with Foyth being able to play the ball up the line, and Moreno, luckily for him, having Gnabry's tackle go into the path of Capuy, and from there you have got serious commitments. We've got here Lo Celso making his run. He started way back here, but now he's already up, looking to try and exploit this space from the counter pressing that we've got here by Hernandez. This is your left centre back, this is your left back, so you can see that there's just an absolute acre of space for Villarreal to be able to counter attack into, and Lo Celso is looking to try and exploit that. We've also got our other centre forward Danjuma looking for that early through ball, potentially either side of Upamecano in behind Pavard maybe, whilst your other centre forward near side has helped in this earlier part of the play. And then you also have your left winger Coquelin coming from that position and more narrow to help with the counter attack. Villarreal were just awesome on the counter. And then this final scenario, I just wanted to show Villarreal building up out of the back again, 2-4, 2-2. At this point, we've got Badrathan, and he's taking up the role that Coquelin had earlier. So, from this deep build-up, he's tucking in a little bit, potentially in between the lines, just behind the 3 in the 4-2-3-1 of Bayern Munich's press. Eventually, Bayern Munich, with Musiala's help here, pressing towards the goalkeeper and now back towards the centre-back, get high enough up the pitch to allow Parejo to be able to receive this ball centrally, and Villarreal look to try and escape out towards their right-hand side. Unfortunately for Villarreal, Capuy isn't able to connect with Foyth on that right hand side, and Bayern Munich are able to flood up the left hand side. You can see just how aggressive and direct Bayern Munich are by just how much ground Davies has covered on this left hand side. Unfortunately for Davies, Sané's pass is a bit poor, really. Maybe Kimmich hadn't read it, I don't know, but it was a bit poor. But Bayern Munich looked to try and immediately counter press, and this is a good example of that. You see that with both these two here, the left winger and the left back, but then also with Kimmich, one of your centre midfielders as well. Okay, so with that, we've covered the main tactics. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider sharing it on social media, maybe subscribing, and with that, we're out.